Today we're going to learn how to apply Xcel Surfaces decking material over new concrete. Doesn't have to be brand new concrete, it could be old. You could resurface any concrete as long as it's sound and not damaged in any kind of way. First things first, you definitely want to make sure the concrete is clean. You want to prep it with Xcel Surfaces citrus cleaner. The recommended amount is ½ cup per gallon. If you have an area that needs a little bit stronger, you can go a little bit more concentrated just to make sure you have everything nice and clean. You want to flood the entire area, and then you want to work it in with a stiff bristle push broom. After you work it in with the broom, you want to let it sit for about 15 minutes so that it can do its magic and loosen up all the dirt and grease that might be on the surface. So after this sits for 15 minutes, it's time to get the power washer going and get everything nice and clean. See if we can. It's very important to take your time when you're power washing. You want to make sure you get it nice and clean. That's the biggest key, to make sure that the system is going to bond to that concrete and never come off. Next, we're going to take a leaf blower and we're going to blow off all the excess water just to help speed up the drying process. After we blow all the water off, we're going to let it sit and dry off. You want it to be completely dry before you go on to the next step. You always want to make sure you unplug your extension cord just because there's still standing water in certain areas and you want to be safe. Once you got your area completely dry, it's time to mask off around the concrete. That way you can protect the existing walls, the existing other areas, the grass. Against this wall, I would recommend a fiber tape. It's really strong and it's hard to rip. You want to put it on at the bottom, but the material, once you're all said and done, it's going to be about 1/16 of an inch thick. So you do want to allow clearance for that, so that once this peels off, it comes off cleanly. Once you got that base tape down all the way around, I highly recommend Using a hand masker, it makes masking off a breeze. I recommend doing 3 or 4 rows of masking paper, especially when doing the final finish of lace. You're going to spray this out of a hopper, so you're going to get a bunch of splatter everywhere, so you definitely want to protect everything. There it is. Those are the steps to mask down the house and keep everything protected. Is masked off and you got everything protected. The next step is to use the all-season acrylic additive. You're going to use this as a bond coat. You're going to put this down over the entire surface, and that's what's going to allow for the material to stick properly to the surface. It's going to go on very, very thin. You should get close to 200 square feet per gallon as a bond coat, so it does go on very, very thin. You can either spray it with a paint sprayer or you can roll it. Today we're going to roll it on. Since this is a brand new bucket and it's been sitting for a while, all the polymers settle to the bottom of the bucket. So you want to take a variable speed drill and mix it for a good 20-30 seconds just to get everything incorporated and ready to go. You can use just your conventional 3/8 nap roller. You don't need to use anything fancy, but if you prefer it, you can. You do not want to leave any puddles, and you don't want to put down too much because once it dries, it'll turn into a plastic film, and that will cause a bond breaker. Once the additive is rolled down, it dries pretty quick, usually 15 to 30 minutes depending on the weather. If it's a little cooler outside, it'll take longer. But once it's completely dry, it's going to dry clear and it's going to have just a small sheen to it. And that's when you're ready for the next step, which is the scratch coat. For the next step, which is the scratch coat, we're going to use the all-season acrylic additive and the Xcel Surfaces texture mix. For this particular area, the final color is going to be button gray, so I'm going to use gray texture mix. All of our texture mixes work exactly the same. They all do the same thing. We just have different colors available to match your final color, just to add some protection to that final coat. For a scratch coat, we're going to use approximately 2 gallons for a full 50-pound bag. This job is not that big, so we're gonna use a little bit less. We're gonna adjust our mix to make a little bit less so that we don't end up with a lot left over, so we don't waste any material. It's gonna be a very, very runny mixture. After you initially mix it, you wanna let it sit for about a minute just to let the liquid polymers start to blend in with the dry polymers. After about a minute, you want to remix it, and then you are ready to go. Start putting down the mixture. To put the scratch coat down, you're going to need a pull trowel. I believe this is a 16 by 4.5 inch. And the main reason why this is called a scratch coat is because the trowel is actually going to scratch the concrete. If you don't hear a scratching noise, you're putting it on too thick. With a damp sponge, you're going to use the edge and just wipe the excess right out of the control joint. And you're going to do the same with the outside edge just to make it nice and smooth. So after the scratch coat is completely dry, usually takes about an hour, hour and a half or so. If it's warmer outside, it'll be a lot quicker. You're gonna take a 14-inch scraper and just scrape off any imperfections or any excess material that might have gotten left back during the scratch coat. Once you're done scraping the entire area, you're just going to take your leaf blower again and you're going to blow off any excess dust or anything like that. For the texture coat, we're going to use approximately 1.25 gallons to a 50-pound bag of texture. It's going to be a little bit thicker. It's going to have a pancake batter consistency. Same as with the scratch coat, once you do the initial mix, you want to let it sit for about a minute. Same thing, the liquid polymers are working with the powder polymers, so you want to just let it sit and do its thing. To spray a lace texture, you're going to want to use a hopper gun. The brand I prefer to use is the Marshalltown. It's got several different orifices, so you can decide how thick you want your texture to be or how small. Depends on your preference. I don't recommend doing a texture thicker than a quarter size. Anything over that doesn't allow for proper airspace to allow this to cool your feet. You're also going to need some spikes. This is so that you can walk on the concrete after the texture is sprayed on, so that you don't step on it with bare feet, so you don't mess it all up. You can use a regular pancake compressor, or if you want to spend a little bit more money and get one of the Marshalltown compressors, they're a little more expensive. Whatever you prefer, this will work just fine. When you're going to spray the texture out of the hopper gun, the pattern comes out in a cone, so you want to use a circular motion so that you get an even coat all over the surface. You only need about 15 to 20 pounds of pressure to get the material out of your hopper. You're going to use the same trowel that you used to scratch coat, and you're going to use a figure 8 circular motion to get a nice pattern going. We need to have a damp sponge so that we can keep the trowel nice and clean, so that we can get a nice smooth texture and the material doesn't stick to your trowel. After you're completely done knocking down, you have to let it set up, dry completely before you can put on the color coat. Once the texture is completely dry, for this next step, we're going to need a couple tools. You can either use a utility knife, or you can use this fancy little 5-in-1 paint tool and a regular rubbing brick. So we're going to take our rubbing brick and we're going to hit the outside edges just to smooth them out so that there's no sharp areas that can cut somebody's feet. And with this little tool here, we're going to just clean out the inside of the joint. Take out the excess material. Once we're done with that, we're going to take our floor scraper again, and we're going to scrape off the surface of it just to knock off anything sharp that might have been left back. After we're done with that, we're going to take our leaf blower and we're going to blow off all the excess dust. Once it is all blown off and free of dust and debris, it's time to get the color coat ready so that we can apply it and get it all painted. We're going to use the button gray top coat. It comes in 1 gallons and in 5-gallon buckets. 1 gallon covers approximately 125 square feet. So it depends on how big your job is, on how much paint you're going to need. We do recommend 2 coats. We're going to use your basic 3/8 snap roller. Vamos a usar la misma rola de napa de 3/8 and just the basic 2.5 inch chip brush. With the brush, we're going to cut in the joints and the edges. And that is your first coat of paint. Now you just wait for it to dry and you give it another coat. We got the second coat going, and you can definitely see a difference once you have a second coat. It all looks more uniform. We let this sit and dry completely, and then we are going to put a clear coat over it. After the second coat is completely dry, we are now ready for our sealer, which we call clear glaze. It's available in 1 gallons and 5-gallon buckets. 1 gallon covers approximately 200 square feet. We do recommend 2 coats of clear glaze as well, just like the color coat. We're going to use the same 3/8 snap conventional roller. And that's your clear glaze. After it dries, it's going to have a sheen, but within a couple weeks it should turn to a matte finish.